hopefully going to try and create a world encounter in the creation kit. So if you've played Skyrim, and I assume most of you have, then you'll have encountered many of these traveling all throughout Skyrim. And what they essentially are is mini quests that you can encounter basically anywhere in the world, or at least in very many locations. And the way that's triggered is, I'll try to find an example now, is through specific trigger boxes that are found in various places along the roads of Skyrim. Such as this one. You'll see it's named WE trigger, which means it's a trigger box that when you walk through it, or when it's loaded, depending on the settings of the script, it starts off that quest and it puts things on this location, where you see the little red boxes. Now, the way it does that is, if you click on it, you can see there's a script. It has certain properties, and if it is a road encounter, the default is, I think it's no. Yeah, it's a also and it doesn't show. So the default is not a road encounter, which means it's not someone that's traveling along the road. You have several of those as well, but for this one, we'll just create a standard one. And so if this is default or false, it will send a script event to the story manager, which you can find here, specifically there. You can see there's various branches. This is essentially a tree. And what it does when it sends a script event is it gives some data to that script event, and it sends it to the story manager, and the story manager will then check for every branch, will go past the branches and the leaves, and if it finds something that matches the conditions, it will go into those nodes/quests. For if it's a road encounter, you'll find those in WE road quests, and it sends the keyword WE road start. And if it's one of the ones we have here, it will send the keyword WE start. There are various other quest nodes that you can find here that have certain conditions under which they accept a quest. But you don't need to worry about those when you're creating a world encounter. The first thing we're going to do is change this to a stacked node, just for testing the quest that we're going to make. So you can see at the moment it's a random quest node, which means that if it goes in here, it will pick all of the ones whose conditions are evaluated true at random. If we change it to stacked and we then put the quest we're going to create at the top, that means it will always activate that quest. Keep in mind this is just for testing, so at the end we're going to have to change that back to make sure it doesn't always start that particular quest. Although it does have do all before repeating, which means that it still wouldn't fire our quest all the time. It just means that it would fire all the quests in a specific set order, the one you have here. Then in quests, you can create a new quest, give it an editor ID, for example, AToMM quest. I've made a very small quest outline, which is also why I'm not a quest writer, but my speciality is more implementation. That will hopefully get done by the end of this hour. And give it a priority of 50, which is the standard priority for all world encounter quests. We don't want it to be start game enabled. We do not need it to be run once. It's fine if the player only encounters it, will encounter it multiple times in their game. And the event, we want to have script event so that we can add it to the tree we just saw. We can do we go back to here and we add a quest. You'll see it's added in the bottom, but we can just drag that up. It can be a bit tedious, and of course, the more quests you have in here, the longer that takes. But in principle, it shouldn't matter once you know you've designed your quest right. It doesn't matter the order in which this is in, as long as this particular node is random. You can see here we can also add in conditions. So, for example, if we wanted it to only run at night, we could have, example, I think it's get game. This is like a way to have a browser window open. One thing you'll find during implementation is that you have to Google a lot, and you have to visit a lot of wiki pages, probably multiple times, because there's just so much information. It's impossible to get it all in your head. But you can get pretty quickly once you know where to find them. Get current time, just to make sure it does what we want it to. Yeah. So you'd use get current time, for example, to only do it at night. You'd have get current time is greater than, say, 10 for only after. No, actually, probably not 10. Smaller than, say, 9 o'clock, or it's greater than, say, 20, so 8 p.m. But we don't want to do that right now. If that is something we want to do, we can do it at the very end once we're certain. Once we've done all our testing, because it's a bit annoying if we have to wait for night every time we want to test it. Then we go back to the quest, and one thing you'll find that all world encounter quests have and need is a particular script called W script simply. And that is needed to regulate all the cleanup. So once you've left the area as the player, either finishing that and interacting with that particular quest or not, you want to make sure that everything is cleaned up and it doesn't stick around, because that would lead to increasingly larger and larger file sizes. It already increases as you play, but we don't want to burden the player, and certainly don't want to tank performance. If we had, say, 100 quests running all at the same time, all keeping track of their separate world encounters. Now, we make the very first quest stage in order to have a little piece of script to make sure that we know that our quest is actually started. We just do a simple message box. Which can we remove later when we want that to. So if we now go in game using SKSE, because I have the Fuzzrodo plugin loaded, and we'll see later why we need that. And then go to the cell we just showed, the quest should start. Of course, nothing ever works the first time. And indeed it doesn't, because I didn't even save the plugin. I have to save the plugin, so make sure to enable it, and now we should be able to. Oh, just to double check, I did in fact. Yeah, it's close, so I will have compiled that. And you see the script is added. As you see, the debug message box has showed up that tells us that our quest was indeed started. So that's the very basics of it, but of course it's an empty quest that doesn't do anything at the moment except for telling us that it has started. So one of the things that you want to add, and this is standard again in every world encounter quest, is just the trigger alias. Aliases, if you're not familiar with them, are basically roles that get filled with specific types. So certain aliases can point to actors that you've created or that already existed. In this case, it points to the particular trigger box that activated our world encounter. It doesn't need to be, but we do anything special, but we need to find from event and event data ref 1, I believe. Just double checking that that isn't the case. Yes, ref 1, nothing special in any of the other fields. You'll see there are some others. Most of these are not necessary, at least not the whole location, but you can use those if you want to do something which with whatever hold controls that particular area. So if you want to have say Stormcloak or Imperial soldiers spawning, you can use those. So part of the little quest that I have is basically you find a wizard on the road. You can talk to him. If you don't, that's fine too. But if you talk to him, he's trying to raise a skeleton. And if you talk to him, he either attacks you or helps you out in some way, depending on what you say. So we need to create that. And I believe I noted down which one I already wanted to use as a base for this. Yeah. Unique ID. And now change some things about it. So in principle, it's completely based on this other character, and it has no set appearance. But what if we want to make it so that we know what it's going to look like and control some of its appearance? Well, you can untick use traits, which, amongst other things, I'm pretty sure also controls what he looks like. Chase the race and back to, for a necromancer's appropriate might be a Breton, so there we go. Character gen parts. He's a necromancer, so let's give him a very pale color. And then go to the face. Give him relatively bloodshot eyes. Bit unkept hair. And play a bit with the sliders, because otherwise every single character would look exactly the same. That, and then the skeleton is trying to raise. Let's make it a simple melee skeleton. And to make sure that he doesn't immediately attack the player, you make him unaggressive back from what he used to be. And if we want, you know what? Let's give him also a faction. To believe. Yeah. So make a new faction. W. Add our earlier created necromancer to that as well. Actually, we haven't done that yet. There we go. Right. And now we get to add those to the quest itself. So first we make a new reference alias, and in order to know where to place them, we have to find the markers that you see there. So what you do is we find matching reference near alias the trigger, near type linked ref child, so it has to be a linked ref, which is those green lines you see here, of the trigger that we originally had. And then make some new conditions. There we go. is linked to. We have to use aliases, trigger, yeah, just to make double sure it's actually linked to the trigger that we mentioned before. And then the condition, as ref type, location ref type. WE scene, and WE scene is some of the markers. You can see there's different colors if you look very closely. On top of these X markers headings, WE scene is just one of the surrounding ones, and then there's also a scene marker for basically the scene center marker, which is for things you want to be in the center, and the rest are usually surrounding that and looking at it. We basically do the same thing for the skeleton. We can just copy the conditions from the wizard, but then change the type of the location ref that we want it to be to WE center, because we want the wizard to be looking at the skeleton and attempt to raise it. And this will make sure that the skeleton is placed at the center marker once we place them at the center marker, which is what we're going to do next. So we make the skeleton, we want it to allow dead, and we create a reference to the skeleton, basically making sure that the skeleton is spawned there at that particular place. One other thing that you have to do is add the WE alias script to any aliases of things that are spawned there. So the skeleton is placed there, and if we don't add this script, it might stick around for longer than we would like it to. And this also makes sure that if all the aliases are unloaded, regardless of whether the quest was progressed or not, it's stopped entirely. We want the wizard to be slightly harder. Just to make sure that if the player does fight him, he's a bit of a challenge. So that should mean, if all's well, that once we start the game again and we go to the same location, that we should see the skeleton and the wizard at that point. It hasn't, which is a bit of a red flag. That means that either, well, the quest didn't start. Well, there we go. Must not have been close enough to the actual trigger. Ah, yeah. We didn't change anything about the aggression of them, and they are in the same faction. So probably what I'm guessing is that that one, that the wizard became hostile because they're in the same faction. That one's going to help. So we still need to change that on this particular wizard. Yeah, if we look in AI data, it inherited that from the leveled character. So now it should be relatively neutral to us as players. And of course, make sure we save. Yeah, it helps allies. People in the same faction are probably allies. In fact, we may want to remove it from the skeleton faction, just in case that may be an issue. But now we go back to the quest. Now we want to make the skeleton dead. So alias caps lock, which are alias skeleton dot kill. Just making sure that I'm using the right. Yep. But that points to the reference. We can't kill a alias. We can only kill the actor it's pointing to. Get reference gets us an object reference, which is a reference to an object in the world. Still not an actor. We have to use get reference and then as actor, and then we can kill it. Oh, I think I see the issue. There we go. Missing punctuation, cause of many a code issue. But let's create some dialogue. Now, I said before that we want the player to be able to speak to the necromancer and ask him some questions. So we make a new topic and a new info within that topic. Leave most of the things normal, and we have to add the condition that it is the necromancer, because otherwise we don't. The game doesn't know that we only want this line to be said by the necromancer. And just doesn't seem to know that it's that particular voice type. So well, cross out picture when we get to it. Worst case scenario, we have to add the condition that it is that voice type. To the specific line, like so, which is also a way to get it to be able to be said by everyone with a specific voice type if you didn't specify that it has the alias. Make that a blocking branch so that if so that this is what he says when the player just walks by as a hello, but also when the player first interacts with him, he already says the first starting topic, and then we can make new topics to link that particular topic to. So this particular option is if the player thinks is opposed to necromancy, they can suggest isn't that a bit immoral, to which the necromancer takes great offense. And let's make him angry when he says that. Go back to this topic just to be able to easily copy the conditions. That's one topic. Another topic might be that the player is interested in necromancy, so they want the necromancer to teach them. And so the necromancer is quite pleased with that, and then gives them a spell book. I'm sure it's fine. Or the player already knows that, and the necromancer wants to give them something to help out. The exact idea obviously doesn't matter, but now you don't want to make these response texts too long. You can see it's already well, it gives an indication of how much space you have, but also if it goes on for too long, then the lip sync can get a bit wonky. So you split these long responses, like this one. You can split them up in separate infos. Sorry, not infos. Separate responses, which are played one after the other. Let's make him happy. It says that. You see it already makes this bold, just as a slight warning. And now we of course have to link those topics that we create that we've just created to the to the main one, so that when the player interacts with the necromancer, you can you can see all those potential topics. Now, just as a slight addendum, if the player doesn't know any necromancy spells, it would be odd for them to be able to say that they are a necromancer themselves. So, what I'm going to do is add a condition that runs on the player instead of the person speaking. I keep forgetting what this is. I think it's get has spell. Yes, has spell rees zombie, which is the most basic of necromancy spells. If you wanted to, you could add a long list of knows this necromancy spell, or knows this one, or that one, or that one, or that one. But we'll stick with this one for now. And then, actually, just copy that condition. And paste it here, so that this condition can only be used, can only ask for the necromancer to teach them if they don't know the spell themselves. But let's go and try it out in game. One thing at least I would recommend is just testing and testing and testing as you go along, just to make sure that once you finished a piece, you know that piece at least is working. Some people might prefer to do long pieces, and then if it doesn't work, go debugging. But I like to have that security, and it's also nice to see that it's implemented. The downside of that is that you spend a lot of time, or you can spend a lot of time testing. Which is why I try and set it up that happens as quickly as possible. Okay, so I see two issues. First of all, it's not using the dialogue that we just used, and second of all, it has a black face, which isn't a problem, but it's not what we designed. I see the issue with the voice now. It was based on male condescending, but that didn't. We unticked the use traits tab, so that wasn't inherited along with it. So we have to give the male condescending voice. That's okay, and to generate our face data, I believe it's Control F4. Which nicely does that. It did unload the render window for some reason. But that's fine, since you don't really need to see it. Because there's nothing inherently special about this location, and we can know that we can, and we now know that we can consistently trigger that quest to run. And it should work in every location, or every location that has a trigger like that. Just making sure to run through the trigger. There we go. As you can see, he looks the right, and he's using the voice lines that we gave him. He's not talking, but at least it's, yeah, at least it's moving his mouth, which is courtesy of Fuzzrodo. Like I said, like I mentioned before, if we hadn't done that, the lines would have flown by because it didn't find a voice file. Fuzzrodo is a plugin that's very useful for testing implementation if you don't want to record the voice or hear your own voice back. So you don't have to make those files every time. And that can be done later or by someone else. And we have the two voice lines that we should have. Yeah. Just double check in. Oh gosh, I forget what it is. There we go. Let me just check whether I have the correct one. Yes. Good point. It is Raise Zombie. Although I'm not sure it's called. Well, we'll see. I'll just check in the creation kit. Under spells. There we go. I don't know why I expected it to be done differently. There we go. And now we see that the voice line we conditioned to only show up when the player already knows the spell Raise Zombie has shown up, and the other one has disappeared. Now, we do want something to happen with each of those topics, so let's create different quest stages for each of those. Now, I'm creating different quest stages for each of those, just for clarity's sake, because it's a lot easier to see, well, to have a central overview and only set the quest stage in those dialogue topics. This one will be player. This one will be that the player has asked him, which will just give the book. And then player. Thanks. Let's tell them that they're a fellow necromancer. Now, in the first stage, there's actually in the world encounter script already a very useful function. It's called PW. It's called Make Alias Aggressive and Attack Player, which is done, which needs to be pointing to the WE script. So we make it so that KMyQuest refers to the world encounter script, and then use KMyQuest dot and it doesn't have. Wait, I think aggressive spelled with 2 G's. Yeah. In order to add the spellbook, I'm going to have to add a property. Type book. Place get book. New tome plays zombie. There we go. And use game.getPlayer dot item. I just called it raise that book here. And then in this last simple quest stage, we'll hold that one off for now, because I see we don't have that much time left for that particular. Well, actually, we can make it so that it's a health potion. If you wanted to make it something more complicated, say an item that you can drop and spawn skeletons, that's something you can do in your own time. So a potion. Use called restore health. Let's make it restore health 04. So pretty good healing potion. And then before I have to give way to the next one, oh yes, one important thing that I should mention in the very last stage. So make it the shutdown stage that gets activated once you unload the area. 1,000 is a bit much. You have to add, and this is specific to world encounter quests, you have to add a particular rearm trigger. So I forget the exact syntax. I'm going to look at another quest that does it. This is important to make sure that the trigger resets and the player can start another world encounter in the future when they walk through it. That's it. and just for good measure, to the wizard. But although that might have to, yeah, I figured. You have to call it on the references, not on the aliases. Just so that the wizard and the skeleton, once they're far enough out of the player's sight. Yeah, I'm just gonna test this out in game, and then we've shown the basic principle of a world encounter quest and things that make it more complicated, and expand upon the scope are always possible, and you can expand that as far as you like. But I think this should be able to be done just within the time constrictions. And of course, once we have finished the quest, keep in mind, and definitely don't forget to turn back the random node.
Hello there.
Did someone say something? That might have been something in Skyrim.
Yes, hello there.
Ah, wait, we didn't set this the quest stage. So this we want to get on quest 30, which, as you might expect, sets the stage to 30. Oh, wait, that's missing. And set the stage to 50 if we use that one. And of course, once you've finished up your quest, also remove those message boxes. And make those topics goodbyes if you want them to. well, in cases like this, you might have to do some debugging to see exactly what went wrong. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the time for that because someone else is up to start their lecture. And we have to condition the if we wanted to work further on this, you'd have to condition the topic so that it only shows up once it, if the quest stage is, say, 10 or below. Don't think. Or it might not. Nope, I didn't save. Yep, I just now realized that. Thank you. It's little things that trip like that can trip you. I think I once spent like an hour trying to figure out why a certain quest didn't work when I realized that I hadn't actually activated the plugin that it was in. COW, not COC. Ah, there we go. We've made an enemy, which is very good. Don't think we can get him to start. Yeah, probably not. But yeah, at least we've shown that that particular thing works. Just do a small run for the second branch and leave the third branch for what it is.
Do you move in the other direction just to trigger it?
Did I or can I?
Did you before when I noticed you moved in the other direction?
Yeah, I wasn't because I can't see the trigger box. I'm not exactly sure when I've walked into it, so I thought it might have been behind me. Oh. So for that reason, I just walked back a bit to make sure I crossed it. Let's see, do we have? No. Yeah, but certainly something like interesting NPCs, I imagine, would take a very, very long time to make. And that's if you're working alone. I mean, they also have to coordinate with voice actors, as is the case with many of the large teams that are partnered with the Arcane University. Have to just have a quick look to see if I can SetStage 40. Looks all right. 40. Well, I'm sure that there is a reason why it isn't working. But yeah, we don't have the time to debug that now. But hopefully you've learned something. If you do have any questions about making wall encounters of your own, or you're trying it and it's not working, feel free to pop by in the implementation channel, which would fall under quest and dialogue, or mechanics, depending on what you want to do with some of the extra bits. And I'll give the floor to the next person, which I believe was
Trendane.